Welcome to This Week in Local, a Localogy podcast featuring lively conversations about the local digital ecosystem, hosted by Localogy analysts Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Local. I'm Charles Laughlin, and I'm here with my co-host, Mike Boland. Mike, how's it going?
Hi, Charlie.
So what are you working on this week?
So a lot of stuff happening in the mapping world. And, I won't go over all these headlines, but rather maybe in the interest of time, zero in on one, which is that Apple Maps has done something interesting where they have sort of followed Google down the road of having self-serve listings management. So as we all know, Google has Google Business Profiles,
Right.
which is the artist formerly known as Google My Business,
Right.
where businesses can, either establish themselves, get themselves verified, have an account, and then start to do things like update their information, hours of operation, mask policies, pet friendly, pictures, all that stuff. And Google's always sort of incentivized that behavior through the promise of just better rankings.
Right.
It's basically an SEO thing. It's the carrot and the stick. So essentially Apple has started to do this, and I believe for different reasons, and I'll get into that in a minute. But what it's done is it's launched something that is called Apple Business Connect, very much like Google Business Profiles. You go through a verification process, and then you can update your business place information, which manifests in these cards that show up on Apple Maps. And it actually goes across Apple Maps. It's across Apple products, Siri search, Apple search, all kinds of other things. And then, in addition to being able to update your information as a business, it's coupled that with a few sort of new categories and subcategories. And what, for example, there's a good to know field in these business cards. And that includes things like, free Wi-Fi or pet friendly and stuff like that. And it goes even one step beyond that. And they're adding more functionality and more sort of calls to action, just like Google, again, has been doing for years. There's this takes place in Apple. It manifests in an action button, which is sort of a catch-all for whatever the call to action may be within your vertical. So that could be, booking a hotel room if you're a hotel, and they go through booking.com, ordering groceries. They utilize Instacart, parking spots from Spot Hero. And I mention all those third-party partners because that's sort of Apple Maps MO. Google with Google Maps and everything Google does is to index the universe, right? Apple, knowing that's not its core competency, has been leaning on partners since the very beginning, data partners, everyone from Yelp to Foursquare, and it sort of cobbles all that together in its mapping experience. And those partners still exist in this new sort of self-serve business listings sort of thing they announced. But now on top of all that, Apple is getting essentially all this crowdsourced data. And that's exactly the benefit, which is that, again, just like Google's been doing for years, they're able to really sort of beef up the data that drives Apple Maps on the backs of all this legwork that SMBs are doing. Now, the question is, how and why are SMBs motivated to do this? And again, Google for a long time has motivated SMBs to do this through essentially better SEO. They've communicated loudly that this is a strong rankings factor to have a well-populated profile. Now, Apple Maps, it's interesting. I was thinking about this morning. Do they have that same sort of gravitational pull among SMBs? SMBs are very sort of vanity oriented. Often they'll Google themselves. They'll see what's there. And they recognize Google as a strong source of business leads. I'm not sure Apple Maps has that same gravitational pull among SMBs, but we'll see. I think if anything, it like works in Apple's favor here. It's the fact that, Apple Maps is pre-installed on 1.5 billion iOS and macOS devices.
Though the reason I use it because pure laziness. Yeah.
Right. It may not be the mapping platform of choice for most people, but anyway, it has that scale. So Apple may be able to motivate SMBs to do it in that way. And I think one last angle there, just to touch on, is that this is going to be interesting in that the sort of third-party listings management ecosystem and sort of subsector that we cover a lot, and that's everyone from Yext to Sochi and all these companies that do this. they now have their lives just got more complicated, but also I think a lot more opportune, because it's unclear if this sort of Apple Maps self-serve function has the sort of tools that Google Maps has in terms of multi-location businesses being able to sort of bulk edit and do this sort of management at scale. So I think this is going to be an opportunity for some of those sort of listings management, listings optimization sort of companies to step in and sort of ease that pain point. But that's something we're going to be watching out for in terms of,
Right.
is this a tool that likewise is going to be used by multi-location businesses to just, get all their listings straight. But I'll say one last thing, and it all comes back to what I already said, is if these businesses see Apple Maps as a significant enough source of leads that they're actually going to participate in this sort of self-serve feature.
Right. Yeah. I wonder about, because again, as I said a moment ago, just sort of snarkily, but it's true. I'm an Apple, iPhone user, as are God knows how many other people.
Sure.
How many of them just default to Apple Maps just out of, and I know people who, install Google Maps onto their iPhones. That's
I do that. I use Google
Yeah.
Maps on my iPhone.
Yeah,
It's on the
yeah.
homepage.
Most people I know
Home screen.
actually do that. I'm one of the few who just, it came with Maps. I'm just going to use that because I'm lazy.
Right.
And I find it's sufficient.
Yeah.
It doesn't blow me away, but it's sufficient.
Yeah.
My question, I guess you were saying this, is will it become just part of the service bundle naturally going forward of these sort of listings management providers?
I bet it will.
Yeah.
I think it serves them and their sort of product and services to be able to offer. We work on your multi-location marketing across the board. I mentioned, companies like Sochi, for example. Let's look at Sochi. They work a lot with, GMB, or I keep saying GMB. Of course, that's what we all know it as.
They formerly known as GMB, right?
Yeah. Now it's Google Business Profiles.
I don't know why they did that, because GMB I thought was
right. Well, and if you look back, it's had like 7 different names over the last decade. Google plus local, all these things.
Yeah.
But anyway, a player like Sochi, they currently do that sort of, very holistic, will manage your marketing across places like Yelp, and GMB, or Google Business Profiles, GPB.
Right. GMB is a more fluid acronym.
Right. But to answer your question, yes, this will be added to their service bundle in pursuant to that, that need to be a one-stop shop for all the places where consumers are going to find local businesses. It's
probably important enough that, okay, now that this is available, we should probably just start doing it for, And then will that drive more adoption and more rich data collection by Apple?
Yeah, Apple wants that to happen. And I'm sure that there are conversations happening today in the conference rooms of the Sochis of the world of, how they build around this new offering. But another sort of thing that overlays this that's interesting is sort of the motivations for doing it. I always like to look at the why. And with the why, it's often about following the money. So if you look at Google, why does Google offer Google Business Profiles? And I think there's a few different things. One is, yes, it wants to make its front end user experience better by just having better data, better, mapping functionality,
better
but also
results.
Google sort of onboards some of its small business and local business leads through doing this. It gets them excited about adding their profile, maintaining their profile. Some portion of those will double down and then become paid search advertisers.
Right.
Apple, I think it's different. Their goal and their sort of all roads lead back to selling more iThings, right? Hardware is their core business. And I think a lot of people have speculated about Apple going down the road of advertising, and I think that's possible. Apple also needs to diversify its revenues because, the iPhone, which is its cash cow, continues to hit sort of global saturation and maturation. So for that reason, they might go into advertising, and this is sort of one thing that gets them closer in terms of some of that local advertising sort of framework. But I think moreover, the more they make Apple Maps better, the more they have sort of differentiation in a consumer's decision to buy an iPhone versus an Android phone because they want to use Apple Maps. And Apple for years has been sort of this sort of second tier player to Google Maps, excuse me, in terms of catching up, in terms of gaining the functionality. Google has the market share lead. It has for a while. Apple also is sort of for years trying to sort of heal the black eye left from remember Mapgate when it first launched, and it was just totally dysfunctional. It had the Apple style gloss.
Yeah.
And polish, but just was totally dysfunctional. Since
Right.
then, they've done a great job in actually making a damn good mapping product, again, through all those data partners, but they're still trying to like innovate and innovate. And I think that one of the good things about that is that consumers win by continuing, and small businesses in this case, continuing to benefit from all these moves that Apple is driven to make to improve Apple Maps. And again, I think their main motivating factor goes back to the reasons they do a lot of those sort of loss leader products and apps, which is to make the iPhone a more attractive purchase. So I guess the moral of the story there is that the end result is sort of similar, but the motivating factor is so much different between why Google provides Google Business Profiles as a tool, and now Apple is providing this Apple Business Connect, as they're calling it.
So Google's motivation is closer to the money. Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They're loss leaders in either case, but they're driving towards some other source of revenue, and it's different for each one.
Okay. Fair enough. So I've been writing about a little bit, thinking about a little bit. This whole, I mean, I was kind of, we've been a little snarky about ChatGPT. I mean, I think we both acknowledge it's a powerful piece of software, whatever you want to call it, and it's changing the landscape, for lack of a better way to describe it. What's interesting to me right now is kind of the monetization of ChatGPT, and there's been a few things happening recently that are interesting around that. One of these is that ChatGPT, which as we all know, Microsoft is involved in OpenAI, which is the owner and operator of ChatGPT, put $1 billion in a few years back. I think it was 2019, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Anyone later. And then now they're leading a $10 billion investment into OpenAI, which I believe would give them like about half the business, 49%, something like that. And then it leads to a $29 billion valuation on OpenAI. Right before we came on, I was saying something about this on Twitter. I got an immediate reply saying that $29 billion valuation is ridiculous. And I'm always inclined to think a $29 billion valuation is ridiculous because it's so darn much money. But is it? And I don't know if we can answer that right now, but I think it's a fair question. Is that really a crazy valuation given the massive size of at least the available market that this is touching and hovering over and threatening to become part of, right?
Absolutely.
And that 29 billion could prove to be modest, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's crazy, maybe it's modest. I guess we'll find out, right? Eventually. But a couple interesting things are happening around this. Again, there's this investment, which I think we're learning more about what the particulars of it are. I don't want to get into that now because I've seen a few conflicting things on whether it's equity or just an investment for a return. We'll have more on that soon. The Bing angle is interesting, and I wrote about this last week, and it's been talked about quite a bit, before and since then. The integration of ChatGPT into Bing to make Bing stronger, because Bing has been kind of a punchline, sort of like the old joke about where do you hide a body? Second page of Google.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the setup line is to the punchline that's Bing.
It's the Avis. It's the Avis of the Avis Rent-A-Car of the
right. And so they're trying
world.
to go from Avis. Who's the leader in rent-a-cars? I haven't rented a car in a while.
Probably Enterprise.
Okay, so they want to go from Avis to Enterprise, or at least Enterprise adjacent, right? And is ChatGPT integration going to be the thing that gets them there? Now, I don't know. I think whatever threatens Google's, search ad business, I guess, is good for Bing, right? So, and Bing is underlying technology for a lot of things that we don't talk about every day, like, one of which is Neva, which I think I've mentioned before. and I've written about before. It's this subscription-based search engine that is, I think, recently went from testing to launch, and now they're saying we're going to have an AI engine that we've developed or something like that. They're going to have a Chat GPT-like component to their product, and I think it's kind of being seen as the sort of tip of the spear for competing with Google now.
Yeah. And I think that, well, of course, with any investment, sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's strategic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what Microsoft has done here is probably a little bit of both, but I think the strategic angle is more interesting. And that's what you've been talking about in light of Bing. I think that's interesting. Everyone's calling Chat GPT a Google killer, right? So it makes sense.
And we've been a little
yeah.
We've pushed back on that and saying, okay, hold on.
It's exaggerated, right? But but you know, if Google's one of Google's biggest sort of competitors, which is Bing, wants to use that as a weapon, it would make sense. Right. I think and Microsoft has so many products. I mean, look at Microsoft Office, for example. Right. I think there's a lot that you can use sort of AI-based chat in the workflows of everything from like PowerPoint to Excel. I think I was thinking the other day, just sort of jokingly, this could be like the 2.0 version of like Clippy. Looks like you're building a resume, like a Chat GPT.
Can I offer you some suggestions, Mike? Yeah,
could finally be something that's like useful in Microsoft Office.
Right, that's kind of funny. Instead of Clippy, it's something that's like blows your mind.
It'll write your term paper for you.
Right. Well, I think if ChatGPT isn't integrated into Office, I keep, again, on Twitter, I'm following ChatGPT on Twitter a lot. Like, what are people saying about it there? That's where I'm kind of getting a sense of sort of the zeitgeist around ChatGPT. And a lot of it's people sharing experiences like, I asked ChatGPT to build a website for me, and now here's the website. I don't think it literally built the website for him. I think it created the steps for him to do it himself or something like that. I haven't done this myself yet. But if you could see, build a slide deck for me about risk management,
Yeah.
And suddenly you have a PowerPoint deck from ChatGPT. I don't know. I could imagine certainly having it in Word saying, write me an essay about penguins playing poker in front of the Golden Gate Bridge or whatever it is. And, I could see that.
Now, Microsoft could probably work on those integrations without owning ChatGPT.
No, I think anyone could do that.
Right, but I think that the ownership sort of puts them in the room in terms of sort of steering the direction.
Right, exactly. Now they're at the table in OpenAI.
Yeah.
To say, let's create these things.
Yeah.
Or could we create these things at least? Being in the room is way better than not being in the room, right?
Yeah, and it gives them sort of favored nation status in any sort of business development that's going to happen. Yeah,
as long as they're in that investment that they have, I would imagine that opportunity, and to the degree to which they're exercising that opportunity, I don't know right now. I would imagine to their fullest ability at some point.
Yeah.
The other thing that is interesting that I noticed just before, because how does GPT make money is a question that I'm curious about, and I don't know that I have great answers for it. But just before we came onto this recording, I noticed a few stories that had been shared earlier today that ChatGPT is working on a paid version. Because one of the questions, and I don't have any details beyond that, we'll do something on it this week. But what was interesting, is before this, I saw this, there was a lot of chatter about what if they just had some sort of gating on GPT usage, like you can only use it so many times before, like a lot of things. There's a usage.
That's how
gating.
DALL-E works. Other forms of AI from OpenAI, DALL-E does that. I mean, because there's such intense server requirements to do that. So they essentially charge based on use. Right. ChatGPT, I think, could do something like that. But also, I'm thinking some of those sort of enterprise customizable versions of it that you use, like, let's go back to Enterprise Rent-A-Car. On their website, they want to have a chat bot that sort of is their customer service engine. Right. They pay for that on a sort of per use basis. Right. So I think those integrations are how it makes money.
Yeah. So I think, this has been a cost to OpenAI up to this point.
Yeah.
and OpenAI I believe is losing a fair amount of money.
Yeah. But I think B2B to C is where OpenAI is going to live.
Right. So I think we'll see, whatever. I'm not sure what Microsoft will do to advance the monetization of Chat GPT, but I think this moving to sort of a free to paid model. I don't know what dollars they're thinking about with that. I'm going to have to go look at it more carefully.
But the
something I noticed literally just before we came on here. Been hearing about this now. Now it's coming.
Yeah, but the end user isn't paying in a lot of those situations.
Yeah, it's been free to this point. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is someone's paying, but it's not the end user. I think where they make money is the brand or the company or the customer service experience bringing you that they're paying for it, but the end user is
right. So the company that embeds the chatbot is paying a third party to run that.
Correct.
It's like probably a SaaS,
and they're paying licensing to
it's a
OpenAI.
licensing. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So there'll be a lot more to discuss about, what the future of that is. I know at the upcoming conference, we'll be having various conversations about AI's impact on local, and that, it's not just search. Ultimately, it will be on the creator economy will be impacted. I think very, very dramatically by AI. I think we're just now starting to figure out what that's going to be. We'll probably know a lot more in April. We'll have a lot of interesting conversations about this at the event in April. And I think probably a good point to end today, Mike, unless you had something else you wanted to talk about.
Nope.
Okay, then we'll end it there. Thanks for joining, everyone. Please subscribe, like, rate, review, all that stuff you do with podcasts. Please do that for us if you enjoy what we're doing. We love the feedback. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Localogy's This Week in Local with Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin. Be sure to subscribe for more.